Hey there. You ever wonder why Scripture says, according to God, the penalty for sin is death, but then when it comes to us, He tells us to forgive each other without asking for payment? Kind of seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? Well, stick with me. I'm going to unpack this, and at the end of this video, you're going to understand that it's not what it seems. There is no contradiction. Stay tuned. All right, here's the deal. God sent His only Son to pay for the price of sin because God states in Scripture that the wages of sin is death. Okay? But then He says, forgive your brother up to 70 times 7 without asking for any kind of payment. So it kind of sounds like a double standard. I get it. Why does there have to be a price for sin to begin with? It's a simple question. I mean, if my daughter comes up to me and asks me to forgive her for something, I'm just going to say I forgive you. I'm not going to ask her to pay a price, right? You know, like if I punch my buddy Brad in the face, he would be pretty ticked. But if I ask him to forgive me, he can just forgive me without asking for any kind of a payment. So why is that? Is there actually a double standard? It's actually not as complicated as you would think. Let me break this down for you step by step, okay? All right, first point I want to make. Sin isn't just about messing around with each other and doing things to each other that we should and shouldn't do. Think about King David. In Psalms 51, he says, only you, God, have I sinned against. Now, this is right after he had slept with someone's wife, which that's a sin. Then, to make matters worse, had her husband killed so that he could cover up the crime. And then after that states, only you, God, have I sinned against. So how is that possible? Well, here's why. We have to define what a sin is first. Sin is anything contrary to God's will or word. God defines what sin is, not us. So, technically, since He made the rule and stated anything I tell you to do or not do is the sin if you go against it, technically, even though that other person is suffering the consequence of your action, it was God that we sinned against. Because again, He decides what's sin. Sin is doing anything contrary to what He says. He made the rule. You broke the rule. You sinned against Him, even though that other person suffered the consequence of it. So, that's point number one. That even though we use the term in Christian circles that I sinned against my brother, or I sinned against this person, it's God you sinned against. You may have offended that person. You may have done something where they had to suffer the consequences of it and you should apologize for it. But the sin was actually against God. Point number two. So why does God demand a penalty for sin? The simple answer is because God is justice itself. He does just things because He is justice. He acts in love because He's love itself. God is very multifaceted. One of the differences between Him and us is the fact that you and I could diminish one of our attributes and it'd still be us. God can't lose or diminish any of His attributes or He would no longer be God. So everything God does is 100% and 100% perfect. In other words, when He loves, it's 100% perfect. When He's angry, it's perfect anger. When God has justice carried out, it's perfect justice in every way. So, why is that important? Again, Scripture says the penalty for sin is death. In this case, we're not talking about one person's sin or what I did. We're talking about a price that had to be paid for every sin that has ever been committed by any person from eternity past to eternity future. Which means, if justice is served, whatever over here that is done to compensate for over here has to at least be equal, right? And we're talking about every sin ever committed by any person for all of eternity. Let's pause this for a second and let's do an analogy. If you stole bread from a store and they busted you and you got caught and you went to court, the judge is going to rule over you and he's going to sentence you. If he were to sentence you life in prison for stealing bread, anyone would say that's unjust, that justice was not served. Other side of the coin. What if someone commits murder and then they get caught, they go before a judge, and the judge says, okay, 6 months probation. anyone would say justice is not served. Why? Because innately in us, we understand that at its core, justice is balancing an equation, so to speak. That something happened over here, and we're going to compensate it over here by a payment being made. Okay? In essence, that's all justice really is. And if God is perfect justice, then he can't let sin go unpunished. At the end of the day, sin has to be dealt with. Okay? That's why there had to be a price for sin. Now, back to the price. What is a price that is perfect and pure enough and holy enough and has enough life in it to pay for the sins caused from every person of all of eternity? Well, it would have to be something that is full, perfect life and that is sinless. It's pure and holy in every way to counteract that much sin and darkness, right? So what is that? Jesus. In John 1, well, we'll start in John 1:1. It says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were created through him and for him, and without him was nothing made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. Life literally comes from Jesus. So he made the perfect sacrifice. He could balance out the equation, so to speak. Over here, you got all of the sins of any person who's ever committed any sin in all of eternity. Eternity past, eternity future. Over here, you have the life of Jesus. God himself in the form of God's Son. And it's complicated. I'll make a video about that. But it's God giving his life. He is life itself. Therefore, the debt has been paid. Get it? God is justice itself. Therefore, sin had to be paid for. We're talking about all the sins of any person who's ever committed any sin forever. Balancing out the equation is the life of Jesus, who's perfect in every way in life itself. Because that price is paid already, we now can freely forgive each other without asking for payment. Get it? All right. I hope this cleared some things up for you. Till next time, God bless you, and I hope to see you soon.